So we'll open the December 12th Orono Town Council meeting. And since we were originally muted, we'll go through it again. Roll call shows all members are present. Agenda review. We announced the postponement of the items identified under the executive session due to the absence of our town manager. And item 3 was approval of the minutes. And we had a motion to approve them as corrected. There was one correction on there. So the motion was from Megan and seconded by Cheryl. And we'll vote again, all those in favor of approving the minutes as corrected.
You want to identify the correction? Does it matter for the record?
I can identify real quick, in new business order 22210, it was listed that Sonia and I were opposed, we actually abstained.
Thank you, Rob. And now we're at public comments. We had a very important public comment. Thank you. Any other public comments? And these are on any items that are not on the agenda. I don't see anybody in here and then nobody online. Okay. So we'll move on to public hearings. Public hearing A is to consider a vitulous license for DMCP Group LLC, doing business as Dunkin' Donuts, 3 Stillwater Avenue. Patrick.
Hello, everyone. Patrick Guesty, code enforcement officer, and I'm also representing police, fire, and town clerk with our approvals. Staff has completed the inspection and is recommending approval.
Thank you, Patrick. Are there any comments from the public on the issuing of this license? Either in-house or online? You don't see any online, Bill? Then we'll close public hearing A and move on to public hearing B to consider a vitulous license for Lynn's Kitchen, 156 Park Street.
And this is a new business, and staff has completed their inspection and is recommending approval.
Thank you. And once again, comments from the public for or against the issuing of this license? Don't see any in-house. None online again, Bill?
Nothing online.
So we will close public hearing B. And public hearing C is to consider a marijuana establishment tier 1 cultivation license for Dustin Sear, doing business as Irie, is that how you pronounce it? Farmer LLC, 9 Godfrey Drive, Orono.
And staff has completed their inspection. I also created a checklist to go by the ordinance to make sure that they're meeting all the standards, and they are. And we're recommending approval.
And comments for or against the issuing of this license from the public? None in-house. Any online, Bill? None. My only comment is I'm concerned, I spoke with you about, I'm concerned about odor
Yes.
and the potential for that, and I hope we're going to be alert to that possibility.
Yes, right now they currently have sealed doors on every room. And then if there is an issue, then filters will be put in place with scrubber filters.
Any other comments? Then we will close public hearing C. And move on to public hearing D. To consider a contract zone application for Zachary Pike, located at 74 Mill Street, tax map 27-12, lot 35. The application process to change the zoning district for the parcel from medium density residential to village commercial with certain restrictions in place. And our planner is here. Nice to see you.
Yeah, everyone. 2 meetings in a row. So I can start out by giving you an overview of sort of where we are with this and a little just background on the contract zone process for the public hearing. So 74 Mill Street is currently the location of the fire main building. The comprehensive plan recommends that a number of properties that around town that are currently or were currently non-conforming uses. That these properties were viable for contract or conditional zone. In most cases, these were commercial or industrial businesses, uses that are in what are now residential areas. So the use taking place there and any real change in use at the scale that exists on these sites isn't really possible in the existing zoning district that, these lots are situated in. So in this case, the lot in question is separated from the village commercial by one lot. The applicant has indicated that they're looking to do a mixed use redevelopment of the existing building. So keeping the building in place and turning it into a mixture of one or two storefronts towards the front of the building on the Mill Street side, and then some apartment buildings or apartment units in the rest of the space. The contract zone agreement was based around that. So what the agreement does on a larger scale is it would convert the zoning district for the parcel from medium density residential districts to village commercial districts. Section A of that outlines some of the permitted uses. So you're taking uses that are allowed in the village commercial district, but kind of watering that down to only those uses that would be applicable here. Not allowing things like a gas station or an auto repair shop or things that we know the applicant is looking for and aren't really supported by the comprehensive plan. And then, when you move on to section B, you get into the dimensional requirements. The village commercial and the MDR have a different set of dimensional standards. For one thing, the MDR doesn't allow multifamily units. It's not the same level of housing. So this section is aiming to lighten that a little more. So it talks about not allowing any sort of expansion to the building floor area or footprint. So, we would know going forward that the existing principal building on that lot is what would be used for the land uses we're talking about. There isn't going to be some major addition on the site or change in scale of structures on the site. We talked about the only additions, really being possible would be emergency ingress and egress if needed, and some sort of accessory deck or something like that. The contract also puts a limit on the number of dwelling units. This was based off of the density allowance in the village commercial. It puts into place a standard for the maximum number of bedrooms per dwelling unit. To try to limit the overall scale of bedrooms in each unit to gear it more towards those young professionals, young families, being smaller scale residential units versus those larger scale units that are oftentimes solely rented out to students or rental situations like that. In addition to that, there's some kind of general performance standards in regards to making sure to follow the specific shoreland standards as you get closer to the river. Signage meeting the standards of the ordinance, external lighting being kept really more restrictive than what's allowed in the ordinance so that there isn't any glare or lighting issues bleeding over. Parking being limited to 60 spaces. So as you approach the river, you're not expanding into a more vast impervious area. So you're not impacting things like stormwater management quite as badly. You're still offering some parking, but you're not just covering that whole back area in impervious surface. So with all of this went through public hearing with the planning board. The planning board was solely really looking at this from the lens of, is this change consistent with the comprehensive plan? I mean, for one thing, the comp plan directly called out that this property is ripe for a contract zone, but more specifically with the idea of this use, does that support comp plan goals? The planning board found that it did. When the comp plan talks about growing the village commercial in a compact, walkable manner, creating a mixed-use development with a number of apartment units where people can live in close proximity to the downtown businesses, the public services, public transportation, things like that. It's really growing off of our existing infrastructure. This would, qualify as sort of an infill development, revitalization of something that would, otherwise be pretty difficult to fill, utilizing the MDR district land uses. So I think that pretty much sums up the overview for the project. I guess, one thing to add on to that would be, the contract zone is really looking at the fundamental underlying zoning and allowable land uses and dimensional requirements that go into the site. Any actual project here that the applicant is bringing forward, specific engineered plans would still have to go to the planning board for review through the site plan and subdivision process. At that time, things like traffic, access in and out of the lot, and stormwater management, and any impacts on the ground and surrounding properties would be looked at a lot more substantially at that time. It's hard to kind of give any guarantees. It's, for instance, just because a contract zone is passed doesn't mean a project automatically is approved for site plan review. It's a completely separate process, with additional public hearings and additional room for changes and input. The contract zone is really setting an underlying foundation for that application forward. So just important to keep in mind. But yeah, with that, happy to answer any questions that people might have.
Thank you. I think this is the opportunity for members of the public to comment on this proposal. So let's open the floor to.
What about, are we going to?
Yeah, I think, yes. Yes, I think the public hearing one here first from the public, and then if council members have additional questions, that's fine. So anybody in the public like to comment on this or against? Nobody? Yeah. Please identify yourself. If you would.
Just face some folks know me by now.
Yeah, but for the,
I'm back.
Shout it into the owl.
talk to the owl.
I'm curious about a couple of things. One is the applicant always the owner of what will be? Are they the final
So
of the endeavor?
in this case, the applicant has a purchase and sale agreement for the property. The contract zone agreement runs with the property though. So if the owner were, the applicant in this situation, if you were to end up being the owner and developing it in this way, and then years from now decided to sell, the contract zone agreement would still apply to that new owner.
So the applicant is the same gentleman that was here.
Yes.
And he will be the owner of that building.
Correct.
Okay, great, thank you. I was thinking about the tax breaks or incentives. I know that you mentioned them before. And I'm wondering what tax incentives there might be for the applicants in building this. And what the tax considerations might be for people who live in that medium of residential area, such as myself, in case property values do go down. And maybe you have some history on that as well. So wondering what incentives go to the purchase and
Locally.
There are no local incentives from the town of Orono on this project. It'll be taxed at its full fair market value when it's completed.
But what about the homeowners in the area? Okay, well, do the tax values seem to go down and the house values go down or up with the placement of this? That's what I'm asking.
Well, I'm not sure that any of us have the expertise to answer that fully. I'm going to give you an opinion, okay? I look at the condition of the building currently. And I imagine the condition of the building after total renovation and build out. And have to think it's going to be a much more attractive site which I can't imagine would be a negative to the values in the area. But that's just an opinion. I don't know. Do you have a better answer?
So,
Traffic.
I have a text from Sophie who says neighborhood values won't go down. And of course, the assessor is not here. The assessor is who determines the value of homes. We're not in a revaluation process either. So I think that adding to our tax base would have a positive effect on your tax bill, not as in it would increase it, but as in it would be better for you to have increased tax base. I don't know about your value. And can't make any guarantees because that's the assessors.
Well, but it's already gone up because everything's going up when I bought the house, et cetera. I'm just wondering if things start to decline now. If there are issues from this new bill. Do you see a time when home values might plummet for the neighbors around the buyers?
Can I just ask clarifying, are you asking about the market value? Or are you asking about your assessed value and what you're going to pay for taxes?
The amount of taxes that the people pay on their houses and what their retail will, if it will go up and down.
I would say market, obviously.
Okay, market.
Would have no idea. I don't think anyone would say no. I can speak to that. There's no one can speak to that, but I just wanted to think what you were asking.
So,
Sorry.
you can always, if you feel that your home is overvalued, you can always apply for an abatement. And the assessor would review it at that time. And there's deadlines and it's based on the value, based on this, facts on the ground as of April 1st of each year.
I think it's also important to remember that the public hearing for tonight is about the contract zone itself and not the development of the property. So if you had specific questions that we can't answer tonight and wanted to send those along, then when we get down the road to the point where we're actually talking about the project itself, that is a time that those questions maybe could be discussed more fully. But tonight is really just about the change in the zoning itself and not any development. And I understand that they're related, of course, but if we don't have the answers you need tonight, then, you know, this is not about the project itself, but the zone.
Yeah, the contract zoning, I understand a lot of towns have them, and I'm not in favor of the contract zone change. There's no reason to do that other than to incent someone to come in, buy this property and turn it into something more presentable, more marketable. And I don't necessarily like seeing it coming for that reason. And the other reason is just that you're going to put in what is now, contract zones allow for a lot of shipping. So it was one time it could have been 20 to 30 apartments and 50 to 60 parking spaces, as I recall. And it seems as though that has been, it's like an accordion or a bandbox. It seems to be pulling down. Did you say 50
No.
spaces now?
No, it's been the same. The contract sets a maximum of, the way it's currently drafted, of 30 units in the building with potential for 2 commercial units towards the front. And then a maximum of 60 parking spaces. So those maximums are in there to offer flexibility. It doesn't have to be 30 units. It doesn't have to be 2 commercial units. It could be 1 commercial unit and 24 units of a certain number of bedrooms, or it could be 22 units, you know, with a few of them having slightly more bedrooms and being bigger units. You know, there'd be room in there to shift things around, but the language of the draft contract regarding those things at the last few meetings has remained the same.
Well, I think that parking lot is what worries me because of the size of the road to get down there. You know, only one way in. It'd be lovely if there could be a couple of ways in and out of that. I have no idea the topological.
So all of that will be thoroughly reviewed through the site plan process.
By the planning board.
Right, we get, you know, the applicant would have to go through a civil engineer to develop the site plan with topo and, you know, it would have to access in and out, would have to meet life safety. Their standards, they would have to meet the ordinance standards. It would be reviewed from a pedestrian standpoint of people walking in around the parking lot. It would be viewed from a traffic standpoint of, you know, the impact of the proposed level of traffic that use would be generating on the street coming in and out by our town engineer or public safety director, public works director, all of those things. So all of that would be thoroughly reviewed. It's, you know, and, you know, if there needed to be a second access point, if there needed to be something to solve an issue that came up through that process, you know, we would look at it then. But it's just not, it's not looked at through this part of the.
Well, it's heartening to know that these things will be considered.
And I would like to also, I mean, thank you for all the information. Thank you for your input. I would like to just say that even if like specific concerns that people have are specific to the site plan and not the contract zoning agreement, I don't want to be discouraging people from bringing up issues that they have earlier on in this process. I mean, clearly this contract zoning agreement is the first step in the council sort of ushering along potential site plan for review with public input, but I don't think it's totally inappropriate for public input. I'm not saying that's what you're saying either, but I don't think it's inappropriate. In fact, I think it's quite appropriate for people to be raising their concerns earlier on in the process, even if it isn't specifically done with here. So I guess I just felt the need to say that.
Okay, is you all set?
I'm all set.
So let's see if there are other comments. Thank you.
I have a parking question. Should I wait? Because
Yeah,
it's kind of appropriate to what.
If you don't mind holding on to it, Leo, let's get the public an opportunity to speak and then any questions that council might have. Anybody else in the audience like to speak to this?
We do have somebody online,
Then let's hear from the person online.
so I'm allowing Nancy Larson to speak.
Okay,
Go right-
thank you. Yeah, Nancy Larson, 30 Orono Landing Road. Two things. One is a zoning change is a big deal, and I'm just wondering about the neighbors in the neighborhood and how much input. And I know that this is about zoning, not about the actual details of the building. However, once zoning is changed, that's really a big deal. What's that like for the neighbors there, and to have such a big change in their lives? And in terms of the parking spaces, and I don't know, once the zoning is changed, it sounds like that will allow for all these parking spaces, but that's a small area down there. I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't know enough about where the parking spaces would be, but I just wanted to throw out there, you know, once it's zoned for parking spaces, the builder will want them all. But at what point does the town say, what about having fewer vehicles and going with more of a pedestrian, using public transport and sharing vehicles that belong to the apartment owner, something creative like that. And once the owner has the 60 spaces, he's not going to want to give them up. But is there at some point there could be a limit set? So those are my two comments. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anybody else wish to speak to this? Please come up, identify yourself.
It seems worth mentioning that there is a limit. set.
Yes.
Yeah.
There is.
And that number is actually a reduction of what would have been required previously. Previously, for 30 units, the town ordinance would have required 90 parking spaces, which is exactly what we wanted to get away from, specifically in these sorts of situations where people living in an area can utilize walking, biking, shuttle buses more. And that number is a maximum. So yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to build that much if they don't feel the need.
Thank you, Kyle. Please identify yourself for the record.
Nancy Hall, I live at 26 Beach Street, right around the corner. I have a question, and I think it might be a good follow-up to what was just asked on, from the other person online. I'm curious, the contract zone application, if this application were approved, or whatever the language is, as I understand it, what was said earlier is the buyer, it's sort of connected to the purchaser of the property.
It follows the property itself.
It follows the property, so if the application were not approved, or if the individual backs out from the project, what happens then?
Good question.
So the contract zone is an agreement between a property owner or potential property owner and the town. And it's a method of rezoning the property, usually where the property owner has a general idea of what they want to do with the property, and the town says, okay, yeah, that meets, what we also want to have go on there as well. But let's come up with a certain set of restrictions or standards to make sure that what we're talking about is actually what happens there. If the current applicant, decided they no longer want to do this, this agreement would most likely disappear unless someone else came forward wanting to do the exact same thing, then maybe a very similar contract. So an agreement between the town and that new applicant would be relevant. But the contract zone is a kind of specific method of doing the zone change. There are more general zone changes where the town can initiate something, and the town could just go and change the zone of that lot to village commercial and put in no restrictions. Just say, we've vote to adopt that this is now in the village commercial. The contract zone is more specific. It's usually based off of some sort of conceptual idea of how someone wants to utilize the property.
So it disappears, it would then continue to be,
It would just be zoned as it
Same
is
zone.
now until some new change was presented.
and if somebody were to, if it fell through and it didn't happen, somebody else came along, they'd have to make another application.
Correct.
But if the development goes through, then at that point forward, that zoning, that contract follows that property.
Yep.
So you're asking about if it falls through, does it
Yeah.
disappear? But if it does get built, then the contract zone follows that property as it passes.
There is another contract zone on my street already. It's all in place.
Farther down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To clarify, if he purchases it, and if this zone is approved. And it just doesn't get kicked off, he owns it, the zone is approved, 6 months later, he says, no, I'm not gonna do this. Isn't this contract zone approved
Well-
with that property? It does not disappear.
Yeah, at
that
that
correct?
point, if the council had voted to adopt it and then the 30 days go by to, and it's in effect and the contract is recorded at the registry of deeds within 90 days and, all that happens, then yeah, the contract zone is in effect. If after that, for whatever reason, it doesn't end up happening, then yeah, the town would have to
That
go
contract.
back and either find someone who was okay with developing under that contract. Well, not the town would have to, the property owner could sell it to someone who was interested in developing it that way. Or, they would have to go through a process of just getting rid of the contract agreement to put it back into, just the regular.
So it doesn't just disappear. If it goes through, it's through and it follows the property,
I
right?
was being a little loose with my language.
Yeah, no,
It-
As opposed to,
well,
In
and what you, I
perpetuity.
mean, everyone's said, but it follows the property. Once it's done, it's done. If he does not do this, then someone could come forward with another site plan that meets these
Same
contract
criteria.
requirements,
Mhm.
and that can be done.
I would say that you're pretty limited based on the contract and what's outlined in there. And, utilizing the existing building and the open area where the existing gravel parking area is, it's pretty limited, I think, what a site plan would come up with to actually develop that site. I don't think it would vastly change from one plan to the next, because you're not gonna have any changes, major additions to the building itself. it would really just be formalizing that rear parking area into a paved area, and, you know, there might be some changes to how the units look on the inside, something like that, but the scale of the building itself wouldn't change.
And Kyle, philosophically, isn't that sort of the use of a tool like a contract zone as opposed to a town just changing a parcel to a different zone? Where we control, we can have more tight control over what is developed on that parcel instead of just blanket changing the zone.
Right, I mean, the whole idea here is that this is the, you know, town council saying, you know, based on planning board recommendations and comp plan, that this specific concept meets the goals of the comprehensive plan, not anything possible in the village commercial meets everything the comp plan is saying. You know, you could just change this to village commercial and someone could do something on the lot that doesn't meet the goals of the comp plan. It's the idea that there's been a specific idea brought forward that meets many of the goals of the comp plan. So let's create an agreement that narrows it down to allowing that activity.
Was there anything else you wanted to add?
Well, I do just want to follow up, having you opening the floor. I know that this is about one thing, but I do want to say from my perspective, I'm deeply concerned about traffic on Beach Street and entrance to what would be parking. We have no sidewalks on that street. We have families living down there. And I'm really concerned about what that would do to traffic and just safety, so.
Thank you, appreciate your input. Other comments for or against the? Come on, Chuck.
Please shout into the owl who you are.
My name is John Bradson. I have a property that's in 22 Mill Street, 67 Mill Street, 64 Mill Street, and 2 Summer Street. Forgive me, but has the contract been posted at all?
I can't answer that.
Has the contract
Yes.
been posted publicly,
Yeah, there was.
online, or?
The notice that was sent for the planning board. Which is the same notice, it should have been sent for the council meeting, had a link to. Our planning board public materials folder where the contract, so.
So it was online for public review
Yeah, and it's
Before the-
available.
before the meeting.
Yeah, and the notice also. Would have said, to contact, the town office for a copy of the
Hard copy.
contract.
Do you have hard copies here tonight?
I don't have hard copy.
No one has
with me,
hard copies
but I
tonight?
could-
I have one.
we could get-
I have it open on my laptop if you wanted to borrow it and scroll
No, it's
through.
okay. I would like to see it. I think one of the problems we have here, that I have anyway, is the fact is that it's sort of maybe this is the way it happens with these things, but it's sort of a Nancy Pelosi effect that we have to pass this in order to read it. We have to pass it in order to see it. I haven't seen any, the only assurances that I've gotten so far, from the last planning board meeting was that the developer is more Orono. But I haven't seen any mock-up, I haven't seen any rough, I'm not expecting a spec like the planning board had, but I've not seen any conceptual
So everything the planning,
visual of what this project may look like.
yeah, everything the planning board had was available in the public materials folder ahead of the planning board meeting. You post that there.
As individuals, as
weeks. There was a general kind of sketch of a floor plan. But there hasn't been any, it's utilizing the existing building, so there's no like new building plans as far as.
I mean, for
How the
maybe
applicant would be doing the
possibly,
facade or-
window facades.
Yeah, the applicant
Setbacks.
hasn't, well, the setbacks. Aren't changing for the building because he's using the existing building and the
We
contract,
did receive a lot of
yeah.
renderings of that. We had several meetings. I think there was one in September. there were, where we saw the first draft of the contract, that was a public document. We've had a couple of meetings since then, and the planning board meeting, all of which the contract is included in public documents.
Okay.
We also did get, and the applicant's not really required to do this for the contract zone, but he did come in with renderings of what something could look like based on these requirements, but it wasn't like a actual engineering plan.
No, I'm not expecting at this point, no,
Yeah.
but just for a peace of mind.
Yeah, no, we've had, there's nothing, it's all on top of the table.
Well, I'm not saying it's under.
Yeah, no, I mean, we've,
I just wonder if these people back here have seen anything. Have you seen any renderings or anything at all? Have you been noticed of anything?
I've seen one, but my sense is that it's changed. Is it gone through?
I don't know.
Yeah, so it's.
So,
My point, Tom, is that. You know, I know this is a two-step process, it's complicated, and I know that the building needs to be rehabilitated, and there's no question about that, but my only question would be like, how have you determined the density of the project?
The density
The
is
density.
based on our current density that we allow in the village commercial.
But is that applicable to, since you're doing a contract and you have total leverage over these things, is that applicable to this plot of land now?
Seeing as the village commercial was
No. Yeah, I know.
just a lot away and that
No,
density
it's actually-
allowed for, well, so when you take the density of the village commercial, it's allows for one dwelling unit for every 2,500 square feet of lot area.
Mhm.
So when you look at this lot, that comes to, I think, 31 point something units that would technically be allowed. And then, so the initial, I think, renderings that some people are referencing was, I believe an architect just conceptually looking at a potential floor layout. And they fit 30 units into that space, utilizing largely 1 and 2 bedroom units with a few 3-bedroom units. So that's where that number came from. It was looking at a combination of what the town has for a density allowance in the village commercial, and also what kind of fits the natural existing floor area of the space.
Right. Remember too, that you're putting this contract zone in an area totally surrounded by the dense residential. So in some respects, I mean, you're talking, we've got a density issue. A possible density issue, depending on your point of view. That's my point, whether or not you bring that up, whether or not, I mean, if you look at this cookie cutter and think, well, we can do this here, because this is what our village commercial looked like, but this area is totally surrounded by NDR.
Right?
There's no village commercial anywhere near this area, except for you say for one lot.
Well, no, the village commercial starts, the entire village commercial is just across Summer Street.
Correct.
I mean, so I wouldn't say that there's no village commercial near the area. The entire downtown area is, a very, very short walk down the
Yeah, but
street.
there's still a different zoning.
Sure,
So-
And those people expect, I think, by living in those zones to be protected by those zones.
right, but this building would never be built today in the MDR. This is a.
I agree, that's why it's a contract.
Commercial.
Right.
No, I'm not talking about the new building. I'm talking about the existing building. A building of that scale would never be built in the MDR district, because the MDR allows typically single and 2-family homes.
Right.
Where you have a 30,000 square foot, commercial, industrial.
Well, it was
building.
originally a church. I think that probably would go into the MDR.
Sure, it hasn't. been-
All right, well, my
so
point, my point though is also is like, I realize these steps are complicated, but my point is that we only have leverage now with this contract, and I hope that you use it wisely,
that's a good point.
all right? Because that's the beauty of a contract, if the town approaches it in the correct manner. So that's why I'm raising issues of density and things like that. The other thing I would think about that I have, that bothers me is the fact that the town, if this was planning in the future, which it is, I'm quite sure that we expected at some point, buyers would have to go through this process. we had a project in town from Summer Street to Beach Street. Complete rebuild of a street, which only happens probably every 100 years or so. Complete rebuild right down to the sewer. And we had an opportunity to green that street, to put up maybe urban plantings, to put up some beautiful street lamps, and to make that street attractive for this project. And I think we blew it. The way that street looks now. And this is my point on thinking about development. We have to make sure that this project is the highest quality, the best specs we can get out of it. Or else I really feel that it's going to end up to be university overflow. And that's my concern. So I know you have a lot of work to do, and I hope you do. I know you look at it from a good standpoint. All right, thank you.
Thank you, John, for your input. Anybody else in the audience like to comment?
We have one more online.
Okay.
So I'm
Let's hear it.
allowing John Quinn to speak.
Say the name.
John Quinn?
Go right ahead, Quinn.
Lauren, can you keep an eye on this? Hey, am I just audio?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Just wanted to make sure before I walked around with my camera. Yeah, so I was just wanted to chime in, and I was able to kind of say a similar thing at the planning board meeting, but I live on the corner of Beach Street and Mill Street. So right across from that proposed entrance that folks were talking about, and just wanted to kind of put in my 2 cents that this is a project that I think, is pretty substantially impactful on me and my young family. I am one of those families on Beach Street, but it's also something that, excuse me, that I'm excited about, and I think it impacts me, but I think it impacts the community that I live in a lot more, and I'm just really excited to kind of see something move forward with that property that is going to bring people in and keep the community vibrant and growing. And I think it's a really aligns with those goals of the community of the larger plan in a really positive way, and those make a lot of sense to me. And I just wanted to put it out there that because I think that families on Beach Street might get thrown around a lot, and I'm definitely one of them, and I'm actually very much in support of this project, and I think that it's going to be overall a positive thing for the community, despite maybe an increase in traffic on my road or roads. So yeah, I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you for your input. Anybody else online, Bill?
So Nancy Larson has raised her hand again.
Okay, well, let's make sure we get people who have not spoken first, and then we can go back and hear from her again. Anybody else in the audience like to speak? Okay, then let's and nobody new online?
No.
Okay, let's go back to Nancy Larson then.
Okay.
Go right ahead, Nancy.
Yeah, it's not Nancy, it's her husband, Al Larson,
Okay.
but on
Sorry.
the same tablet, I guess. And I was just looking at the drawing you had there, this building that you're proposing. And looks to me like that's something that would come out of a first-year architectural student. It's just a great big box. And I would hope that if you're gonna put one of these things in town and make it attractive, that you would get somebody who's got a design thought in their mind to make it look good. It's I mean, Buyers right now is a great big box, yellow box sitting there, is falling apart. That doesn't add anything to the town beauty of Orono. And I would hope that you do something different than just tearing that down and putting another great big white box up there. There should be some creativity so that this building, if it goes in, at least looks attractive, and the people that want to come in to live there have some kind of pride and joy in living in this thing. And I know it might cost a little more initially to build it, but so what? If you're going to put something in town, at least I think it ought to look nice. So anyway, that's my thought.
Thank you for your input.
So this is Nancy Larson, 30 Orono
Yay.
Landing Road. And not to steal Al's thunder, but I just have to agree with John now that I've seen the representation online when you screen shared. That is a very high density building. And I just don't know that it belongs there. So I would look at fewer apartments, maybe the same building, but fewer apartments. But once you zone it for the maximum, it will be the maximum because that's what'll make the most money. But I just think that neighborhood and the town won't be able to cope with all of that. That's huge. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Okay,
Hi, everybody. I'm Zach Pike. I apologize for running late. Childcare emergency, but thank you very much for a full meeting, and I just figured I would take a moment to come up here and discuss, a couple of things I've heard since I got
Zach,
here.
want to sit down so we can. get you-
Absolutely.
Please.
And speak into the owl so that folks online can hear too.
That one right
Yep,
there, right in front of me. Perfect. Yeah, I figured I would just try to at least, talk about the things I've heard, and they're all, I think, very valid concerns. And just kind of at least give everybody an opportunity to ask me any questions personally about it since I was here. I know one of the issues that I've heard several different times is the density population of what we plan on doing with it. I think we want it written as village commercial, but I don't think we have any intention of those being the numbers that we plan on putting into the space. The architectural design for just trying to change the ordinance of the space is not really a good factor on what our overall plan is. Which our plan, of course, is to redefine the building in the site plan review part of the committee, which is the next part. So it does look like a big box, I agree. I don't think it looks very attractive. I don't think there's a lot of detail into what the building currently looks like, which is what we would have the architects and the engineers and the historic preservation people that we're working with on once we get through this phase of the project. Without, it's those things are vastly expensive, and without knowing if it's even gonna qualify for anything else, it's difficult to address, all of those other areas, so that's, I think, where our holdup is on our end of trying to really spend the, tens of thousands of dollars on those other areas without knowing where we're gonna end up with in this particular phase of the project. So it does look like a big box. I agree. It makes me laugh because it does. It's not very attractive. I think it could be far more attractive as we move forward. And I also think the number of units, yes, they came in and have 500 square foot units in there as far as the floor plans go. And that's by far not really our intention. It's not our intention of our 25,000 square foot building in Bangor right now. That's 15 apartment units in it. So it's not a very good model of what we are actually doing with our other buildings in the local area. So I don't see that being the model we go with, but in the contract zone period, it's difficult to identify exactly how many units we're gonna have. I'd be very surprised if it was over 22 units as far as we get into the number of bedrooms and everything else that we're doing. I guess those were the issues that I heard people discussing. So those were the ones I wanted to kind of present on our end.
Thanks, Zach. Appreciate you being here.
No problem.
Any other comments? Either in-house or online. So just for the public to know, this was the opportunity for the public to express their opinion. We are not taking any action on this contract zone tonight. We will have an opportunity as a council to think about the comments we've received, to discuss them in a regular meeting, and then to come back at a future meeting and make a decision on whether to
I'd
approve
like to ask them.
or modify.
I was gonna say, Leo, do you still have a?
Yeah.
A question to you.
I was hoping for some discussion with us and with Zach here tonight, possibly, is that not, is that?
Well, and, the purpose of a contract zone, the purpose of the public hearing is to hear from the public. The council is going to have a number of opportunities to discuss it at regularly scheduled meeting. And I'm sure that Zach Pike will be invited to attend those meetings, as will any other member of the public. I mean, if it's something specific about the contract,
It is.
I'm happy to
Just
entertain it.
three kind of things, if I could.
Sure.
And if, I don't want this to go on, but but they're questions I've had some communications with Kyle and Sophie. The first one, I just want to verify. I had some concerns about setbacks and the possibility of decks showing up on that one side. This building is right next to two abutters and it's pretty much on the line. And I learned from Kyle that there aren't any setbacks go away. So theoretically, there could have been. Now, what I just read today makes me think that that is either solved. Under section B, dimensional requirements, says any new accessory structure must meet MDR setbacks. I just want to verify that decks on the side of a building would be considered a accessory structure.
No, a deck would be part of if it was attached to the principal structure, it would be considered part of the principal structure. It wouldn't.
See, I looked it up and I saw different definitions, so I'm glad I asked, because I wanted to bring that up to council, because I think that's a real concern, and that the only way we address that is in this contract, so it's not a site plan thing. And so I guess, I don't know when we do that, but this feels like the time to do this, because it seems like most meetings, it hasn't been.
I can offer comment on this. We talked with the applicant about that, about specific language around a deck setback, because the existing building it's a non-conforming structure. It's right on the property line. The western property line to 64 Mill Street and the northern property line 5 Summer Street. Part of the building there is also right on the property line. So it would be simple enough. And talking with the applicant, he thought it made sense too. In that B3, where it talks about the principal structure floor area and footprint shall not be expanded except for the following uses. And number 2 is talking about allowing the deck. You could clarify that language there, that the deck would not be allowed on that western side of the building, and on the northern side of the building not to go further than the existing building already goes. The way it's shaped is a little wonky.
Is that a change that would trigger a new public hearing, or is that a small enough change?
And so you're not allowing something new, you're just kind of clarifying and kind of refining and making it more restrictive.
That seems like a good change to me as well. I think it would be respectful of the privacy of the butters to just clarify that, and probably would be more comfortable for folks in that building as well. Like nobody wants to be right on top of each other.
So the applicant, when we talked about it, indicated, if there was a deck, it would likely be more on the kind of interior side of the building, the opposite side away from those property lines. And that closest lot there that you come into contact with is actually part of this purchase and sale agreement. So it would be the same property owner there. So there wouldn't be quite as big of a setback concern in that area.
Sorry, Tom, just to clarify, because, sorry, I'm not good with the process here, but I was under the impression that what goes on today is sort of the contract zone. Are we gonna be editing this again?
Correct. We will have an opportunity. Again, the public hearing is our opportunity to hear from the public. We take the public input we've received and we determine at a future meeting how we would like to incorporate that, if we want to incorporate that into the contract zone. So there'll be another opportunity for us to determine before it goes for final approval, what modifications we may want to make to this, if any.
So formal consideration, I think, is scheduled for December 19th. And the purpose
No,
of.
I don't believe that's correct. Is it?
It says in the agenda. I don't know. Well, in any case, the future meeting, we're supposed to take what we hear from the public during public comment, think on it ourselves, come to the next meeting where we will discuss it. If we were to want to make small changes, we would have the option of adopting it at that meeting if we wanted to adopt it. if we wanted to make large enough changes that would trigger the need for another public hearing, then we'd go back to the process again.
Or if we
Or-
wanted to take more time with it and have more discussion, we would postpone final action on it.
So formal consideration is supposed to be December 19th.
Well, it's what it says on the agenda.
So that to me feels like, that's why I want to have this conversation now, just these couple points, but. Because that right there, I think triggered a little change and Sophie thought it would not be significant, de minimis or
Right,
whatever.
but that's what the next meeting, so tonight we listen to the public and we take the public's input. And we can ask questions, points of clarification, but the goal of a meeting like tonight is to hear from the people. And then take that away and we discuss it at a future meeting before deciding whether to adopt or make changes.
But would we theoretically or potentially be adopting this on the 19th when we do formal consideration?
If we heard nothing from the public that concerned us and it was just something that we were just gonna adopt, then we could choose to just adopt it, or if it was minimal changes. But if it was a larger substantive conversation, we could continue it for several meetings. We could
And I'm
not.
And I'm so sort of thinking, I don't want to try and drag anything on, that's why I'd rather have this and put these on the table and hear what.
Yeah, it's okay to have it on the table. We're not gonna make a decision on what to change in the contract zone
Okay,
tonight.
all right, well, let me, then just. The other, on the density, discussion, just thinking about this, we've got 30 units, up to three bedrooms per unit. That could be 30 bedrooms, or it could be 90 bedrooms. And I wonder if the developer has, because I've heard a couple times, it's probably gonna be 24, there's probably only 3 bedrooms. I wonder if there's a way to allay the density concerns by kind of hearing what, and it may not be fully baked, but what could that come down to? In some way, shape, or form with regards to number of bedrooms. Yeah, and the last one is the parking thing, and it's counter, I think, to what everyone else was thinking. It seems interesting, it seems a little bit backwards that we're saying the max is 60. Because I feel like, what if they want to go into the building and put 30 more into the building? That, then they'd have 90, and then, because that alleviates potential parking, we can say, yeah, you should only have this many cars, and this is how many you're gonna have, this is how many spaces you can have, because we want to be environmentally friendly. But if the reality is, it's a complete mess on parking for the most of the year, and not that they would try to go into the building, but normally we wouldn't have a max, we'd have a min, right? This, because we were able to change the thing, we have a min.
I wouldn't say it's normal. I think parking minimums in the past have been normal, and a lot of communities are getting away from parking minimums and either not having a minimum requirement at all or establishing maximums. Because they don't, a lot of communities don't want that kind of just endless potential parking developed. I mean, that number was talked about specifically with the applicant. The applicant was okay with that number, so I feel like that's kind of what led us to the.
So my thinking is to not tie them that way, because if parking becomes an issue, we have the space, then it's better off the street than on the street. Yeah, that's just a thought, but
So, I just want to make sure everybody is aware of Sophie's scheduling plans for your conversation. She is suggesting that you have council discussion on 12/19. And that you schedule a special meeting the last week of December for formal adoption. Or, formal consideration. And then as long as the changes that council suggests are more restrictive, a public hearing is not required. An additional public hearing would not be required. If council went the opposite direction, then.
I don't think there's much chance of that.
Excuse me, earlier, I thought I heard that there will be another public comment for the citizens before this.
So I had said that there would be a public hearing for the site plan application with the planning board later down the line.
However, any meeting in which this contract zone is discussed is a public meeting. In any public meeting, a member of the public can make comments.
Doesn't our public comment state about things not on the agenda?
No,
No, that's the first one. We have another one. And this one,
Any item of action, the public can comment on.
right. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I'm very patient. This is about lighting, and all I want to know is what is a 1/2 foot candle?
So it's the, yeah, it's what the, like the lighting plans, it's the rating that they give. And it's,
So if folks are concerned about lighting coming in with this, and it has to be a 1/2 foot
So
candle,
half
what
of-
does that mean?
half a foot candle is
Measurement-wise?
less than what's normally allowed in the ordinance. So the MDR and everywhere else, the standard for projects going to site plan review is 4-foot candles. So it would be, you know, the light is visible like 4 feet off the ground, basically.
Off the ground.
Yeah.
So it's like what goes around the light? So it's like a 1/2 foot, so it would be like a
So
6 inches?
half a foot candle is what we've used in other contract zones in residential areas.
Okay,
It would basically visually mean that hardly any light at all is coming off of the property line. You would not be able to put a light next to the property line, because if you did, it would go over that amount.
okay.
So basically, the only light that would be allowed at the property line limit would have to be from a light set further in that was kind of tapering off as it got to the property line. You wouldn't be able to put a new light, you know, right by your fence on the property line that was shining into your neighbor's window.
Okay. Keep going.
Other comments from council? Jim?
Quick question. Is this, so we have the village commercial, then we have this application for contract zone. Are there any properties sort of stranded in the middle that will remain MDR?
There would be one.
Just one Summer Street?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, so it's 64 Mill Street is. And I mean, some of the Summer Street properties, sort of because the back of the lot extends down to the river, so you would have a few of those Summer Street properties. I mean, 5 and 7 Summer Street would sort of be in between the back side of the property we're talking about here and the downtown existing. But there wouldn't really be any village commercial use happening towards the back. I mean, the back of the lot would be a parking area that was screened and buffered with vegetation. So there wouldn't really be much noticeable activity on that portion of the lot, so it's mostly just that one lot. And I mean, so with that in mind, I mean, I think we've talked loosely in the past before about, you know, bigger rezoning potentials, you know, I mean, with a contract zone there, you know, the reason, you know, for not looking at more of a corridor long potential rezone is that's a much larger conversation when that the comp plan doesn't necessarily speak to directly, whereas the comp plan did recommend changing the zone for this single lot. So rather than complicating that process, but certainly when we, you know, we talk about further down Mill Street, there's a contract zone. There would be potentially a contract zone here. Right, there could be some conversation if other property owners were interested in a different sort of zone.
That might very well be an issue to
But that's
discuss at the next comprehensive plan section. Any other council comments?
I just want to thank everyone who's come out tonight to give public comments and as well as, I mean, I guess this is a public comment too, but Zach being here to sort of answer questions about the development. I think it is really important for those of us who all, you know, care about our town to be able to speak to one another about the issues that affect us all. And I really kind of want to echo Leo a little bit too, in saying like, I would love to dig into and spend some time making sure that if there are minor ways to make this contract zone agreement, really be in keeping with trying to keep the neighborhood character and ways that we can be doing our due diligence in the next meeting. I'm excited to get into that and hope other folks heard, like, come back next week, same time, and we'll be talking about it again. And I hope we can have a back and forth. Yeah.
We all set? Then we will close the public hearing. And again, thank the folks who either came to the meeting to speak or spoke online. Appreciate the input. Okay. Let's move on to public hearing E, which is to consider an ordinance amendment to the Town of Orono ordinances, Chapter 34, traffic and vehicles, Article 3, stop and standing and parking, Section 34-94, to authorize the town manager discretion with the date that enforcement of the winter parking ban will begin and the date enforcement will end based on seasonal conditions. Val, do you want to speak to this?
Yeah, this one is me. So currently our ordinance is very prescriptive and says that the parking ban will begin on November 1st and end on April 15th. I think we've all noticed in the past several years that perhaps the shoulder seasons are extending and winter doesn't necessarily begin on November 1st. The proposed amendment would read: each year, the town manager, after consultation with the public works director and chief law enforcement officer, has the authority to delay the enforcement of this section to after November 1st or cease enforcement efforts earlier than April 15th as conditions reasonably support. We did kind of a trial run this year, particularly since it was 70 degrees at one point in November. Communication, I think, was pretty effective, letting everybody know when we had our first snow event that was expected. It went out on Facebook, it went out on the sign, it went out on the website. There seemed to be, no, according to the police department, no complaints after that. So the notification period was good. We had a good couple of days notice, and it allowed us to kind of extend our no parking ban with one.
So this is an item that we have discussed in council meeting before, and it is important to bring it to public hearing since it's an ordinance change. And I'm wondering if there are any members of the audience who wish to comment on it for or against.
Here's Amelia.
Call her Bill. I just, you have to go.
Yes, you do, John. I'm sorry, but
The owl can't hear you.
apologies,
I have to state my name and everything.
Yeah.
please.
John Bradson, I won't state my properties and stuff. My question would be if this is, can change every year, I mean, you got to go through the public hearing and it will change it.
If we adopt this ordinance, it'll be in place indefinitely until another council decided they needed to
You
modify.
legally have to determine, the day and the dates.
No, it
No.
gives the town manager discretion to change it
And
We-
it's like
we-
delay it.
We
Dates
would,
established, so.
Just trying to make your job easier.
The ordinance amendment allows the town manager to. It still says November 1st, but it says the town manager has the option to delay that.
All right, just one minute. The other thing, you can get notices out to people. On that, when they are changed, that would be.
yes.
No surprises.
I was wondering if you would ever think about doing notices on town borders where the roads come into town, to let people know of the seasonal change.
Good suggestion.
Typically, it would be, there's a major snowstorm coming, everybody knows. And then that's
Yeah,
when our
I know.
parking ban would go into effect.
Yeah.
But I think
Can't,
that's
you
something.
can't really get ticketed beforehand with a snowstorm, I mean,
So
you have a 60-degree night and you legally get ticketed.
I think the upshot is, like, if someone doesn't know that it's been delayed, then they're beginning their car off the road anyway, so it's kind of only to the good, right? You know it's November 1, if you don't do it, and we get lucky because it hasn't been extended, you didn't know, that's a bonus. So the only thing they wouldn't hear is that it's extended and you don't have to.
Yeah, I'm thinking also for big visitors too. Though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have visitors, especially for sports events and things like that.
Just that doesn't go into effect until midnight. Anyway, right?
Right.
The parking ban is only in effect at midnight. But that's a reasonable suggestion. Thank you. Any other comments for or against
I
this
just have, I
ordinance
have a question
change?
for Beth. So if we change this ordinance, would this be changed before April 15th
Yeah.
this year? I mean, it's 23, didn't 23. Okay.
Anybody online that wanted to comment on this?
There are no hands raised.
They already raised their hands. Okay, no other comments. We will close public hearing E, move on to public hearing F. To allow for public input regarding the use of the town's remaining American Rescue Plan funds, which amount to $708,550. And the town staff has made a proposal of how to use them. And I'm going to ask Belle if she would summarize that, and then we'll hear from the public.
So just a quick overview of what funds we received, what funds have already been encumbered, and then the projected remaining funds in the projects. So we received $1,141,870 in American Rescue Plan Act funds. The town council has encumbered $43,500 for public safety stipends, $34,584 for Lucas devices that are automated CPR devices, $43,847 for a public safety administrative vehicle, $88,400 for council chamber tech upgrade, plus a $12,991 upgrade for that council chamber tech that was a scope change. The public safety building assessment and related repairs was $110,000. The pool filter system and deck repair was estimated at $80,000. And with conversations with contractors, we have budgeted an additional $20,000 for additional budget overruns. So that leaves $708,549 in ARPA funds. The staff has proposed using $235,000 of that for a sanitary sewer rehab from Peter Street to North Main Avenue, and $473,549 of that for a sanitary sewer upsize, which is on Hillside. That's a $515,000 project.
And it's important to remember that there are guidelines as to how municipalities can use this money, and in particular, that it can't be used for direct tax relief.
Correct.
Thank you, Bill. Comments from the public on this item? Hearing none. Anybody online, Bill?
No.
I'm gonna claim new counselor status once again. for the lack of process.
Well, you're gonna get away with that, Leo.
All right, so the process is, what's gonna happen next, because I came with my idea. But I've thought of it since our last meeting, and I didn't, I thought this was our opportunity as well.
So this is the public's opportunity to present any projects that they might have or suggestions that they might have for the use of the ARPA funds. Council will have the opportunity to discuss and take a decision.
Not on a timeline at this point.
No.
No.
So we will be delighted to hear your suggestions at some point.
Please come
Now,
up with an
because this
artist's
is
rendering.
my suggestion.
If you want us to, have some time to think about them, Leo, why don't you go ahead?
This is timely, and I want to put it out for council as a thought.
You've already checked to make sure these qualify under the regulations. or
Well,
whatever.
to consider some level of emergency energy relief funding for town. That wouldn't be taxpayer, that wouldn't be tax relief, that would be.
I don't think that would qualify under the ARPA
If
guidelines.
it didn't, knowing the emergency funds that have, they just did at the state were because of COVID.
Mhm.
I would be.
This is
really-
federal government money that came out 2 years ago with very strict guidelines. They've modified the guidelines some, but
They've
we hear you.
expanded. Okay. I mean, I don't know that. I guess that there would need to be validation, but. I'm interested in council's thought on some level of emergency energy funding for qualified, means tested individuals in town.
So my reaction would be, I would want to see what the state's doing. State is, the governor proposed emergency legislation, which did not receive enough, a 2/3 vote in the state senate. It's going to come back through the hearing process, and I can't imagine that something's not going to happen there.
And that was $475 to.
Well, yes.
And, okay, and I think the estimates are gonna cost people 2,500 more, a typical season, so that's why I still think locally. And again, I don't know, maybe we put something out and nobody comes forward and nobody needs it. But I think that is a real emergency, and I think it's, could be made in case it's COVID related, so. Just food for thought.
And could I say too, that if we don't address sanitary and storm sewer problems through ARPA, we'll have to do it through taxpayer.
Well, one is a problem, one is an upgrade, but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, so eventually it will have to happen.
So we have time to make sure that would qualify before we discuss it again. Other comments?
I'm just like, this is sort of more of a brainstorm. It's not really a critique, but I'm just like noticing that this is here on our agenda, and I appreciate that it's here because I think it's a wonderful thing to provide the opportunity for people in town to come forward with an idea. But I don't think that this was sent out with any more advanced notice or fanfare than our usual town council agenda. And so I wouldn't be surprised if most people in town didn't hear about the opportunity. And I'm just thinking how in the future, if we have something like federal funds that we're able to utilize in creative ways, how nice it would be to include that in some of the community conversations that we've been having, where we're really more intentionally inviting people into the conversation about how we utilize shared resources. So it certainly is a thought that transcends this exact agenda item, but for the future.
Yeah. Anything else? Then we will close public hearing F and move on to the final public hearing G to allow for public input regarding the proposed amendments to the town of Orono fee schedule. And that is going to be tabled until January, so we don't have to do anything with that. Acknowledgements by council members. We'll start with Leo.
I'm gonna pass.
Oh my Lord. Take it.
Okay, I've got two. First, I haven't had a chance to make acknowledgements since this happened, but it's from last month. I had a chance to take my little one to go see Mamma Mia at the high school. It was very well done. It was very exciting to see a big show with a full house in the new theater. Congrats to everybody that worked on that. I am a little angry that I have to listen to ABBA in my house 24 hours a day now, but I'm managing, I'm coping, I'm dealing with it. My child had a meltdown when she realized that the ABBA Christmas song that somehow she had imagined existed didn't last night when we were decorating the tree, but otherwise, it's been great. But so I just want to acknowledge everybody in that facility. I also just want to take a moment, and I'm sure Tom will as well, so I won't step on his heels too much, just to mention that during our consent agenda tonight we'll be having some orders acknowledging 5, 10, 15, and 20-year employees. We also have our employee recognition event this week. I am so sorry that for the first time I won't be able to attend, but my job, I can't leave it on Thursday. Unfortunately, I have a meeting at that exact same time. However, I want to recognize all of the employees that we'll be recognizing on Thursday, since I can't recognize them in person. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, so I, and I know somebody's gonna support me. That's a good word. The Stillwater River Trail is wonderful this year. I had a chance to walk it last night. And it's just beautiful. And so, acknowledge all of the folks that put time and money and effort into that, our public works and our, all kinds of people, Orono Land Trust, you know, has been done some stuff with that, and it's just been instrumental in getting that up and off the ground. So definitely, if you haven't done it yet, do it. It's really nice. The other acknowledgement that I want is, we have some Orono teams in the Nutcracker this year as well. So, and I've heard, I haven't seen it, but I've heard that it's a wonderful production. I think it's at the Gracie, and I think it's still playing. But the kids have put a lot of time and money and effort into that as well. So, happy holidays. That's it.
Thank you.
I'd like to acknowledge Orono student athlete Ruth White, who had a tremendous success at the Girls Cross Country Nationals. She is not only a wicked fast runner, but a super great person and was a fantastic ambassador for Orono.
Thank you. Sign.
I also thought the river trail was wonderful, so thanks to folks who are part of that.
Took words right out of my mouth. And I suppose I really do feel grateful for all the input we got tonight. So I suppose I would just like to acknowledge everybody who gave us public comment today.
Thank you. I would like to acknowledge the passing of longtime Orono resident Claude Westfall, longtime professor at the university. I actually had him as a professor my freshman year in college for engineering graphics, and he was tough. He wasn't tough as a neighbor, but he was tough as a professor, and did a great job. I'd also just piggyback on Megan's comment on staff recognition. I thought I had it right in front of me, but I guess I don't. But Thursday we'll be recognizing employees for their service, and why, thank you. Mitch, you're wonderful. I'm just gonna read the names. 5 years of service, Samuel Irish, Patricia Davis, and Zachary Turner. 10 years of service, David Pinkham, Andrew Brogdon, Dylan Smart, James Thompson, Bell Ryder. Wow. And Travis Day. 15 years of service, Louise Jolie and Scott Willett. And 20 years of service, Police Captain Scott LaJoy. And that's very impressive. Okay, moving on to unfinished business. We have none. And we're on to the consent agenda. Could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
And
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? 7 in favor. And now moving on to new business. Order 22-228, order approving an amendment to the Town of Orono ordinances, Chapter 18, Section 135, off-street parking and loading, E2, to reduce minimum parking spaces for residential uses. And
Move approval?
move
Second?
approval and seconded, and you gonna speak to that?
We update that it's, we talked about this several times. It's an amendment that was specifically recommended in the comprehensive plan. It's gone through planning board public hearing and council public hearing as well. So if there's any final questions on it, I'm happy to answer.
Any questions from council? Any questions from our public? Okay, then we will vote on that, order 22-228. All those in favor? And none opposed. Order 22-229. Order approving an ordinance amendment to the town of Orono's ordinances, chapter 34, traffic and vehicles, article 3, stopping, standing and parking. Section 34-94, to authorize the town manager discretion with the date the enforcement of the winter parking ban will begin and the date enforcement will end based upon seasonal conditions. Motion to approve, please. And second. I think they were pretty clear on that. Any comment you'd like to make, chief?
No, I was trying to jump the order, I guess, and get ready for the next one.
Okay.
But I think we talked about it that way.
Yes, we have. Any comments for public? On this? None, none online? All those in favor of order 22-229? 7 in favor, none opposed. Order 22-230, order approving the transfer of any portion of the defendant in rem number 1, $3,600, and defendants in rem number 2, 1 Taurus pistol, as set forth in the Penobscot Criminal Court docket number CR-20-2556, State versus Daniel McBriety, pursuant to 15 MRSA section 5824-3 and section 5826, paragraph 6, further authorizing the town manager, if approved by the court, to transfer 15% of the funds received to the Penobscot County District Attorney.
You okay?
Yes.
Move approval.
Second,
Second.
Dan.
So, Dan Merrill, Deputy Police Chief, seeking approval tonight for $3,600 in cash and 1 9mm pistol, as you already spoke to. It stems from a traffic stop that we conducted in August of 2020, where we made a stop with the operator, Ms. McBriety, and she had some drugs and a firearm and the cash inside of her car. We seized it, and should the council choose to accept it, we're looking to take possession of it. We'll take the cash and put it into our normal asset forfeiture account that we utilize for tough books and other items that the police department may need. The plan is with the firearms, as I've been talking with Sophie, these firearms that we turn in, I'm working on getting with a outside vendor that actually disposes of these properly. So it's like I describe it as a paper shredder, but for firearms. It's just this gigantic machine that this vendor has where they can show the firearms as they're destroying them. They throw them, they're destroyed, completely inoperable. So it's something that I've seen in some other shows, and I know some other agencies around have used them. So that would be what we would be seeking to do.
Great. Questions or comments? If none, ready for vote? All those in favor? And opposed? And abstentions? Okay, thank you, Dan. Thank you. Motion is passed. 5 in favor, none opposed, and 2 abstentions. I think I've lost my place again.
Item 10.
Council committee and representative.
Oh, would everybody be offended if we skipped that report? Everybody was attending the last committee meeting, and they're all online. And unless somebody really feels they need to comment on it. Okay, we'll go over that.
Use your agenda.
Future agenda items. Any future agenda items or items of concern from council members?
I suppose this is a future agenda item now. I had just a question about one of, and so we don't need to get into the details of it if they're proprietary, but the executive sessions that got postponed. The one that's related to the town manager's performance evaluation. I was curious if there was a process for that that I could read up on in advance of.
So, yes. The executive session that was listed was strictly to discuss process.
Okay, great,
And materials that we use.
perfect.
We will not be doing any evaluation at the first executive session, just discussing process.
Perfect. Well, good.
Anything else? But thank you for asking.
Absolutely.
Good question. We have what?
Public petitions,
Public
I believe.
petitions.
Not the chair yet.
Just
hungry.
Public comments.
I know, I'm.
I think we have none. Okay, you ready for adjournment? I am. Moved, seconded, all in favor. I do have a few things for people to sign. So at least one thing, so if you could